Take it away, Ann.
Thank you. So welcome everyone for being here. This webinar is intended for all of our CIFellows mentors. We're not going to go into the history of the program or whatnot, because obviously you all know a bit about it. I'm Ann Schwartz-Drobnis. I'm the director of the Computing Community Consortium, which is one of the subcommittees at CRA. CRA, as you know, works on behalf of the computing research community. And we're based here in DC, and we do whatever we can for the community. Most of your departments, I assume all of your departments actually, are probably members of CRA. And the CCC is one of the subcommittees that actually works on the future visioning for the field. So I've interacted with some of you in various activities in the past. And one of the things we did back in 2009 with the economic downturn, the CIFellows program, and CCC really ramped it up through CRA. And when everything was happening last spring, through some quick conversations at CRA, we decided it was time to do it again. So the chairs of CCC and CRA got together and we launched this program. On behalf of CRA and CCC, I want to thank all of you. It's that we could not do what we're doing for the future of our field, for the graduates whose opportunities were essentially usurped because of the economic downturn, without you all willing to step up. And we gave you little to no time to meet new people, talk about research projects, be willing to say, yes, I'll take a risk and work with you. So thank you. We had major successes from the program 10 years ago. Things are different now, but hopefully for the better. We've got lots of new opportunities, and I cannot tell you how excited everyone in the broader community, from top down at NSF, all the way through the people we've talked to make this program really successful. So we're really looking at this as an opportunity to give you guys some feedback, some thoughts, things to look out for, particularly with postdocs coming out right now and things to do, and then give you an opportunity for questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Liz Bradley, who is the current chair of the CCC.
Welcome, everyone. Just to echo what Mark and Ann said, this is a really, really important thing. And I know, as Ann said, we didn't give you a whole lot of time to put all this together, and we really, really appreciate your being willing to respond to this somewhat different postdoc program. This is not your kind of mother's postdoc. This is a slightly different animal. We are very interested in, among other things, having a cohort and helping those people build a cohort, and in the interests of making the next 1 or 2 years into a career enhancer for them. So this is not just let me finish the 3 papers that were left in my PhD thesis to finish. This is something really new, and you guys are going to be, you people, you wonderful people are going to be critical to them attaining this. So you're all aware of some of this because you had to write a letter for the proposal, and you had to come up with a mentoring plan for the proposal. And those were reviewed, and they were an important component in the review process that caused us to decide who to give these things to. And this is not kind of like a postdoc mentoring plan that there's no one on the NSF call, on this call from the NSF, right, Ann? Okay, so this is not like the postdoc mentoring plan that you write for an NSF proposal and you never look at again. Okay, this is not that. I'm sorry, I have a cat who's complaining. Goodness. So this one, we actually want you to kind of revisit. We want you to come up with an IDP, an individual development plan for your postdoc, and actually meet with that person maybe quarterly to discuss that. And of course, they have to submit quarterly reports detailing their research and related career enhancement activities. They're not hugely long things like NSF annual reports, but they are substantive, and we really do want them to be well thought out and hopefully useful to everybody. There was some talk, I don't know if we're still planning to do this, and to share the quarterly reports across all the fellows. I'm not sure if we're still planning to do that. Do you know if we are, Ann and Mark?
We're probably not going to be sharing them across all the fellows. We're going to be working with them.
Yeah, I just remember seeing that in the proposal and thinking that feels like a little bit of not private
Yeah.
enough. But anyway, okay. So I would suggest that you get involved with your fellow so that they don't start writing this at 11:59 the night before it's due, and so it actually is useful. So let's see. Let me find the rest of my notes here. The post, maybe, Anne, we should send around the postdoc mentoring plan that went with the proposal for this, unless we've already done that, and you're ahead of me as usual.
I'll get to that in administrivia once you go through.
Okay, administrivia.
Finish
Awesome.
your notes and then I'll go there.
Okay, so basically, Anne and I and Bobby Schnabel spent a fair bit of time thinking about the postdoctoral mentoring plan that went into this proposal. We want to ensure that a minimal set of best practices are followed. We're not going to pursue, you guys, people all know how to mentor postdocs. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're just going to offer some best practices and see if some of those are things that you might like to do. And again, the individual development plan is a big piece of that. And there are some specific strategies like besides the IDP, obviously you should meet about the IDP. It would be great if, oh dear, sorry, let me kill that phone.
By the way, I wouldn't assume that you've all mentored postdocs. I assume you've all mentored PhD students. And so I think this should be about mentoring postdocs.
Okay. And speaking of mentoring, the mentee should have the opportunity to supervise or co-supervise other students. That's something you're trying to move these people into the academic research pipeline, and obviously help them with developing their own research agenda, and including, importantly, proposal writing, because that's going to be very important to them. So in the second quarterly report, the fellows will actually be asked to include a copy of the IDP, the individual development plan, and describe whether it's working out well or changes need to be made. So there's a bunch of administrative structure that we've wrapped around this, but really what's important is that your mentoring of this person in this very tough time to move them along their career path. And again, I thank all of you for being willing to do that.
Thanks, Liz. So administrivia, I'm going to try to keep this somewhat brief. There isn't a whole lot. As Liz said, well, first off, subawards, I think 55 out of the 59 are done, signed, sealed. So we're getting there. Or maybe 55 out of 59 have all gone to NSF. Many of them are signed, sealed, delivered, we're done. Because dealing with such a large batch through NSF, we had to make them all as standard as possible. So thank you for your work on that. If you had to be involved at your school level, dealing with over 40 different institutions to try to make it work has been fun. So that being said, the only official requirement going forward is the quarterly report that Liz just mentioned. And it's each postdoc has to submit to us a quarterly report on their progress in order for us to pay on the invoices from the institutions. We are requiring that in their second quarterly report, so 6 months after they start, you are involved in that. And we specifically want them to talk about the mentor relationship that they've developed, include any of the resources they've used, as Liz just mentioned, the IDP plan. So really focusing on the mentorship relationship to ensure that they're not just there doing their own thing, working off. Beyond that, there's nothing official that you have to do other than be a really good mentor, because we want to launch really good future professors. So that's our goal. If there are ever any questions of anything you need to worry about, please, please, please feel free to reach out to us at CRA. I know I've spoken with some of you independently about little nuances, things going on. In this time of COVID and virtual work and everything, we are trying to be as flexible as we can to make it all work, realizing though that this is 100% federal funds. So we do have to be responsible and do have some restrictions on us and how we do things as well. But if anything comes up, please do reach out. And also the number one thing I'm going to say, like, in this crazy virtual world, we're trying to do what we can to support everyone. So we're really working just like this, even if it's through creating a community of mentors. We've got the Slack channel, and I know some of you are using it. The fellows are using it quite a bit. They've created their own happy hours and so forth. And we're really trying to ensure, you know, they're not out going to conferences, meeting the people that they would. So we're really doing what we can to create a cohort amongst them. And so anything you can help to do to facilitate that would be wonderful as well. I think, are we at the point to talk about the panel, Mark? To go to the panel? I think we're
so, because the panel is all question and answer. So, all right. So my name is Mark Hill. I was a co-PI on this and on the selection committee. And I'm a professor emeritus at the University of Wisconsin, specializing in computer architecture. So what we're going to do this panel, one of the things I don't like about panels is when panelists give long speeches, and panelists often don't like to prepare them. So I participated in a panel that was just question and answers. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with, I think it's 10 questions that I'm going to rotate among the panelists to ask. And then we're going to depend on you to have subsequent questions, or we get to finish early. And so please submit your questions via the chat to everyone, because it's just sort of not workable to arbitrate and speak among this many people. And so what I'm going to do is ask questions, like I said, of the panelists, and I'm going to introduce each of them before I ask the first question to them. And panelists, remember, there's a target person first, but then others are allowed to chime in if they want to elaborate. All right, so the first question is going to go to Professor Jen Rexford. She's the Gordon Y.S. Wu Professor in Engineering at Princeton University and the Chair of Computer Science. She's a former CCC Council member. She was a CIFellows mentor in 2011 to Joshua Reich, who I guess is now at AT&T Research. Her research focuses on internet routing, network measurement, network management, with the larger goal of making data networks easier to understand, manage, and I'll add survive COVID-19. So my question for Jen is, what do you feel is different about managing a postdoc instead of managing a PhD student?
Well, I mean, the postdocs clearly come in much more prepared, much more their own self, but they have much less time to complete whatever it is they're hoping to get out of their postdoc. And so I think in terms of both their research growth and their professional development, it's helpful to be thinking about how to make use of that time effectively. And in particular, of the postdocs I've advised, some have wanted to continue going deeper in a direction similar to their PhD work, and others have wanted to pivot to add a different disciplinary hammer or go to a different layer in the protocol stack, if you will, than they had in their PhD work. And so I find talking with them right at the beginning about, you know, what they're really hoping to get out of the postdoc, so that we strike the right balance in terms of the kind of work they want to do. And similarly, related to that is, you know, do they want to go broad or do they want to go deep? Do they want to have one big project, or are they hoping to explore a handful of different directions? Because again, they don't have a lot of time, so it's risky to have too many projects going on in parallel, particularly if they're leading more than one of them. And so along those lines, I'll often ask them if they would like to get experience mentoring grad students, and that can be, you know, a way for them to have a second or third project that's not their primary project while still getting some valuable professional development. More generally on the professional side, I think it's really useful to encourage them to give presentations right at the very beginning to the group, so you can start giving them feedback on how they give talks, so they can get to know other people in the department quickly, and to meet other people in the field at other schools, which obviously is harder now because we can't really send them on a road trip to visit other schools, but we can encourage other schools to invite them to give invited talks on Zoom. And finally, I would just say I do try to expose them to how I think about writing proposals and how to think about long-term vision and shorter-term execution, but I try not to involve them directly in it, just because it can be, you know, kind of a slog for them at a time they're really trying to strategically get their own work done.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. Would any of the other panelists like to augment the answer? Okay.
I think one thing I will add is that and it's not a crisp distinction between postdoc and PhD, but by and large, postdocs have a much better sense of what they want. Where when you get PhD students coming in, it's very common that they're not sure. They think they know and they change their mind. Postdocs really know. And so from the beginning, you have an opportunity to say, we're going to spend the moments that you have here focused on your career goal, which with a PhD student, you're discovering what their career goal is.
Excellent. Okay, so our second question is going to Professor Dilma De Silva. She is the Ford Motor Company Design Professor at Texas A&M University and Department Head for Computer Science and Engineering. She was a speaker at How to Mentor at the CIFellows workshop in 2014. She's got a long career, a lot of it in industry, working on IBM's advanced operating systems, such as a file system, and at Qualcomm, Silicon Valley Research in cloud computing. And she's been at Texas A&M now for like 6 years. So Dilma, what do you feel is the most important thing to be an effective mentor?
So let me clarify that I was first a postdoc mentor in industry of a large number, and then I became a PhD advisor when I moved to academia. And I remember when I got my job offer, they said, "Yo, we'll give you money to hire postdocs so that they can build up your lab." And my eyes went like this, because for my experience, postdocs was for me to build their career. So I'm like, I have this new big job as a department head, and now I have also to worry about other people's career. It seemed to me not the right way, so I decided not to have that. So for me, I think the key part is about communication in 4 aspects. So one important one is that the kind of active listening that we do with postdocs, I think it has to be different from PhD students. I think that it is important that we really hear about their goals. As Stefan said, they usually know more, but sometimes it is through the conversation that they will realize the underlying motivations. And also they have to figure it out, who they are. They're not there to reproduce their advisor's vision. They're not there to reproduce, you mentor's vision. So that part of the explicit active listening is important. A second one is very direct communication. I think it's possible to be extremely encouraging without sugarcoating, without tell them, where things can work, where things cannot work. So I think that that's the time to do. They are now more mature, and they will also benefit from that experience, where we maintain an emphasis on strengths, but never, sugarcoat, or just let them learn let them apply to that school. Yeah, let them think they have, a research statement is in shape. If it's not in shape, it's good to be very direct. And when giving opinions, our opinions come with a view of the world. And I think sometimes they do not understand. We may give an opinion thinking that they want to pursue one kind of job or one kind of goal, and it's not. So it may be a good exercise to answer before we answer, in particular in the IDP, on the plan that you guys are going to reassess. Try to understand, if the goal next is this kind of job, then my opinion is this, otherwise that. And finally, I think that communication is something that most of us don't manage to evolve our PhD students a lot. I joke that I probably interviewed 200 people when I was at IBM or at Qualcomm for people graduating with PhDs. So from all wonderful schools. And I could see that if you asked a question that was a little different and more about, for example, I used to ask, tell me about a work that is not yours, from your advisor, that you look and you think, this is so beautiful. I wish I were part of that team. And I would say that 80% didn't have an answer to that. So I would help. I said, well, I was at that conference and I saw that kind of work. Did you think? So I think that getting them to talk about what we do, what do I do in technical terms, and knowing that science has a narrative, I think that is very good if you can fit that in.
Okay, would any other panelists like to augment that excellent answer? All right. If not, we'll move on to Rajiv Allure, who's the Zisman Family Professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He led a CCC workshop on computer-aided personalized education. He was a CIFellows mentor in 2010 to Jodati Deshmus, who's now at USC, and I guess you're a mentor again in 2020 to Sugaman Bansal. So you're talking to yourself as well. Previously at Bell Labs, formal language for system design, cyber-physical systems, programming languages, theoretical, computer science. So Rajiv, oh, did I do this out of order? I guess I did this out of order.
That's okay. Just switch the question order.
Yep, sorry, Stefan. Have you or your past mentees decided on expectations? How have you tracked progress?
Yeah, thanks. So so for expectations, I guess the one big challenge for postdocs is learning how to manage time, and that's critical to an academic career. And as Jen said, I think it's good for postdocs to get involved in multiple projects. So when a postdoc starts with me, I explain to them that how much time they can expect to be involved with different threads of research. So they should continue with some of the work that they had been doing with their PhD advisor to wrap it up. So it's good to finish that, get some more publications out of it. And then some new project with me and with people in my group, and that would bring a new dimension to what they're doing. And then take some initiative and establish collaborations with other groups at Penn, or maybe even other researchers in other universities. So the expectation is more about, how do they manage time? How much time do they devote to these different thrusts? And different people may have different take on this, depending on what they actually want to achieve from a postdoc. But setting that expectation clearly that, how much time they're expected to work on projects that are of immediate interest to you versus time spent on other things. So it's good to get that cleared up. But the more projects that they get involved in is better for their careers, because that's how they learn how to make progress on different fronts at the same time. Because as a PhD student, you're focused just on your thesis, and now this is kind of a new ball game, right? Yeah. And so in terms of tracking this progress, so it's very important to set aside some meetings just to discuss their career progress, right? So I think in terms of research projects, we are very used to that. We have weekly meetings, and then we discuss, what's the new thing they have done during that week. But at least on a monthly basis, meet with them just for this purpose, that how they think their career is progressing, what are their goals, when are they going to apply for academic jobs, what are the new positions that are coming on board, and how to position for that, right? Because one key aspect of landing a good academic job is to thinking ahead what your job talk is going to be, right? Even you may be working on multiple projects, but in the end, what will be your research statement and what will be your job talk? Is it appealing? Is it timely? Would it appeal to a broader computer science audience? So I set aside time to discuss that specifically at least once on a monthly basis.
Okay, anyone else? It's a reticent crowd. It's amazing. Usually professors are used to doing, 95% of the talking in a room. All right, so our final panelist is Stefan Savage. He's professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at UC San Diego. He was a member of the CIFellows steering committee. He was a CIFellows mentor in 2009 to Damon McCoy, who's now at NYU. His interests lie in the intersection of computer security, distributed systems, and networking. He's co-director of 2 centers, one on network systems, the other, I really like the title. It's a center, evidence-based security research. Sounds like a good thing. So Stefan, what I'd like to ask you is, what is your best piece of advice to ensure your postdoc has a successful experience?
So thanks. I don't know if I have a singular best piece of advice that hasn't already been given. So as you remarked, there's a lot of commonality here. But I'd say that there are 3 things that I think about when we have postdocs come in. The very first issue is kind of a repotting exercise. So unlike PhD students, where they have a whole cohort who comes in and they understand they're doing something new, the postdoc is kind of on their own. And they're on their own for a short period of time. They don't have people with them. And so getting them actually integrated, they just spent 6 years getting their PhD, and they're off in a new place. They don't know the students, they don't know the advisors, they're not about to take classes. So they don't have a natural way to integrate, and they're going to feel alien. And so the very first thing that needs to be done with a postdoc is spend a lot of time socializing them inside your organization. And it's extra hard right now. I have a postdoc I'm doing this with right now because they're not physically here. We're not physically in place. And so the additional burden, I think, on the mentor here is quite strong, because otherwise it's very easy for them to be some other distant thing. After that, and this is a bit of a recapitulation of what's been said before, but I think that it's really key with postdocs to help them understand, given their goal, what are all the things that they have to do during this 2 years that you have together, and really 1.5, because they're going to start applying, halfway through their second year. And it's not that there has to be a single path that you need to put your stake in the ground and say, if any of these things go off track, you can't make it, but that there are different aspects that they need to develop so that the narrative of who they are works better when they go out on the job market. And sometimes you have to force this issue, because after all the stress of graduating, some postdocs can have a tendency to say, all right, now I don't have to worry about anything. I'm going to go just and hack on stuff because I don't want to deal with the stress of this. And so it is important to kind of bring that out, not as a scary thing necessarily, but to make them engage with the parts of themselves that are not as strong. So for example, if they are not as good a speaker, if they are not as good a writer, if they are not as good at framing problems but are great at executing, then that's where they actually are going to need to spend time. And then the last thing I would say, and I'm fairly ambivalent about like lots of projects, few projects. I mean, there's different people who have, there's different situations. And I would always encourage students to think about how can they maximize their career in the context of what specific advantages the institution and people they're working with have. But the last part is more than you would do with a PhD student, kind of opening up about the realities of trying to get this job and what faculty life is like. And that includes explaining how department politics works. And that includes explaining what actually is involved in getting a job that is not just throwing your resume over and hoping that it works. And so like getting them involved in the campaign process for getting someone an interview, and not making it something that they are abstracted from, but that they understand, because that's part of what they're getting into, and they will be able to help and handle it better if they understand how it really works. So that was long-winded, but that's how I think about making the experience work well.
Okay, others? I guess not. Okay, so we're going to have another round of questions to each of the panelists, and then there's one catch-all question, and then we'll segue to questions to the chat that you should send to everyone. So these won't be in the same order though. So Jen, how have you and your past mentee done course corrections?
So to me, the most common failure mode that starts to happen with a postdoc is that they take on too many projects. They have, one or two things they're still wrapping up from their PhD work. They get excited because they meet all the people in the group, and they end up having, sort of side projects going on with several of them. And they may even have met someone at a conference and have some remote collaboration going on. And then all of a sudden they're doing a ton of interesting things, but they're only superficially involved in each one. And they also may not have a lot of experience yet in mentoring graduate students. And so they may end up sort of becoming almost a de facto co-advisor. Now there's two grown-ups on the project and a one or more students. And so it's not always clear that the postdoc's doing something. They're spending a lot of time in meetings, a lot of time thrashing and not getting anything done, even though they're excited about everything that they're involved in. And so several times I've had to kind of have a sit down and say, okay, you're involved in all these projects. Let's assess what's going on with each of them. And at the beginning, there's a lot of optimism. This one's almost done. This one won't take that long. And in the end, that ends up not being the case. And so it's a matter of sitting down and saying, well, we need to protect your time to make sure you can really dig deep in some of these projects. And maybe it involves also me getting out of some of the projects so that they really are the solo advisor of the grad student on a particular sub project, so that I'm not somehow taking all the oxygen out of the room. So I do try to meet, monthly or so, just to check in on the status of all the projects and make sure there are not too many threads open. I would say it's actually a problem probably all of us have too, right? We all get excited about too many things, and it's easy to actually be in a lot of meetings and not actually doing something interesting in them. So that's I think for me, a common course correction, particularly with postdocs and even with more senior grad students, because the new projects open before old ones close. It's not a stable situation.
Okay, we're going to go back to Stefan. How have your postdocs interacted with your graduate students?
So I think this is going to depend a little bit on where you're at, but as a rule, with the postdocs that we've had, they have largely embedded with graduate students. So they sat in the same offices with graduate students. They work closely with them on their projects. And that, I think most of the postdocs we've had who are coming through because they want academic jobs are very much interested in having some kind of mentorship experience, but it's not at the same remove that you have as an advisor. So our postdocs they go out to lunch, they go out, drinking with the students, but then they try to also have this other, more mentorship relationship. But I think it by and large works out because they are significantly more senior, and the students tend to realize that they can get a lot more face time with the postdocs than they can with the faculty. And so it's a great learning opportunity for them, but very tightly integrated has been my experience.
Okay, Dilma, how have you fostered your postdocs' work-life balance?
So for me, this discussion goes within the theme of time management in general, which is something that I say most of us struggle and keep getting a little better slowly. So there is this aspect of discussing time management and lessons learned from me and from other people and sharing stories. I think that often is important. I also, I'm very, I'm particularly careful not to assign any task or expectations of things that should be get done over the weekend. And I'm very explicit about if Christmas break is coming, Christmas break is coming. We don't plan on our Usenix ATC submission January 11th that we're going to get it done on that time. So from the beginning, making it sure that it's very important that they need that, all of us need that long term. And I also say how I'm a bad example, that because I can't many times say no to my passions, I choose to be overcommitted. It doesn't happen to me. It's no surprise. It is my choice because I don't want to let go of some passions, and I pay the price. And I tell them how I pay the price. So it's a very honest discussion. I have a few people that I admire, role models in our community that I've attended talks, and they seem to have it all together in sense of, stopping of working every day at 6 and things like that. So I also pass those stories, how impressed I am, and it is possible, but it has to be doesn't happen to you. Of course, people, depending on their particular circumstance, this is much more active. I had the opportunity to mentor many postdocs who were having babies, new babies in the family. And that was a great opportunity to get them to train while with me, how they'll handle that going forward in their next job.
Okay, Rajiv, how would you encourage, would you encourage a postdoc to teach?
I think teaching a course as an independent instructor is a significant time commitment. And yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. And particularly at Penn, it's not even feasible, because when if someone is asked to teach, they have to go through a lot of review, have to be hired as a part-time lecturer. So there's like a lengthy process, and it's just not logistically feasible. But even if it were feasible, I think teaching a course as an independent instructor is too much of a time commitment. But so the obvious solution is to ask the postdoctoral researcher to teach a module in some PhD level seminar, and like maybe 2-3 lectures, and many of my postdocs have done that, and that turns out to be very useful. Also, in weekly seminars, they can take a lead, and they can organize the seminar, and that's also a good experience for them to reach out to different groups and think of more like a theme on how to organize this weekly seminar that most research groups have, right? So I think that level of commitment seems like a good match in terms of how much time they have and the experience that they need.
Did anyone else want to comment, since different schools and subfields are different?
I would say that depends on what the goal, depending on which universities the postdoc may be targeting afterwards. It may be that a very strong experience in teaching may be productive. So it's a case by case. If we think that the person will really shine, and it is possible to allocate a smaller section than usual and give all the material ready and minimize as much as we can, more than even we do with our new assistant professors that most of us are so, helpful and protectful. I think it may be important. I think it played out well for some that I've seen going to the job market, that they had this, really glowing letter from the department head or from the associate head for academics, just saying, how amazing the person was. And also the mentoring and the diversity aspect sometimes comes across that, the way that they really could be supportive to students, but it is more than a time sink. So for many situations, it's probably a no-no, but I think we have to consider it carefully. And if the institution allows that, that would be good.
Yeah, and I just want to point to the comments. If you're not following the chat, a few people have put some things in there about it. Both Yuri, who is now a mentor, but was a CI fellow 10 years ago, it commented on his experience, and Kim commented that her postdoc CI fellow has a strong interest in teaching. And actually this year, there are some CI fellows who are at teaching institutions, not simply research institutions. So I think the advice that both Dilma and Rajiv gave, if it's something that your postdoc really wants to do, letting them know how much of time it will take of theirs, given the work-life balance, the other interests and so forth. It is something though that to not just say, don't do it, or yes, you have to do it, but really to work with them in whatever structure you have and know that it will be supported.
And to add to that, we do sometimes have people come through whose goal is actually to end up at a teaching institution. And in fact, the thing that they have lacked in their career is the teaching experience. And so, there is and they're not, coming out of an R1 with a lot of research, they're just not even going to get interviewed at a teaching school because they won't be taken seriously unless they actually have teaching under their belt. I would say if they are trying to do both and it makes sense, and it's feasible for them to pull it off, I would strongly recommend not having them do some big course with a curriculum that they have to master. The places where I've seen it work is when they teach a course in their research specialty, for example, or where the curriculum is so firmly developed that they can just imbibe it and they don't have to redesign it from scratch. There are a huge number of advantages for faculty who have actually had some experience teaching, because it is, I'm sure all of you remember what it's like the first time you get dumped into a classroom having had zero experience whatsoever doing this and told, oh, master it instantly. But I would also agree with Rajiv that it's because it is such a huge time sink, that given the compressed time frame that they have to get research results done, if they're competing for R1 faculty jobs, it's a tough trade-off to advocate for.
So I'm the moderator, so I'm not supposed to give my opinion, but I don't follow rules very well. The other thing I found works really well is have people teach a unit in an undergraduate class, right? So that's like 4 lectures. They use your notes. They see what the experience is like. You know, you can show them some of the exam results later. You know, gives them some experience, and they can do it very inefficiently, right? They can do it at 3 times the normal prep time, and it really helps them later, and they can point to it. Okay, so we have our final sort of catch-all question here, and then we'll segue to your questions from the chat. And this is for everybody. I guess I'll call out names just as a method of arbitration. How have you guided postdocs in exploring career options, academic versus industry research, industry versus startup versus policy? So perhaps starting with Jen.
Yeah, just to broaden that question a little, I've had a number of postdocs who have a more theoretical background and want to apply that theoretical background to more practical problems in computer networking, my area. And so, you know, even if they're primarily looking for academic jobs, they want to get some contact with industry. And they obviously don't have time to do an internship, right? That's sort of not going to happen, but I'll try to connect them with collaborators, particularly if I have an ongoing project that's connected with industry, or to have a series of calls with, you know, colleagues in industry to help ground the particular problem that they're working on. In fact, I've been doing a lot more of that in the last few months because of COVID, because we're not just running into people at conferences. And so we'll set up a 1-hour call and say, hey, can you talk with my postdoc and I about the problem that she's thinking of working on, and give us some feedback. Is this problem interesting? Is it important? Are we ignoring something that we should be paying attention to? And I found that's at least gets a little bit of what you might have gotten during an internship without obviously being quite the same as doing one. And sometimes you'll find that the postdoc really enjoys that and actually gets really jazzed more. And that might help them in figuring out if an industrial research job might be a possible fit for them down the road, and hopefully makes it more possible for them to apply for such positions too.
Okay, Rajiv.
Yeah, I think, you know, keeping these options open is obviously a good thing. So the last time I had a CI fellow, so this was around 2010, I guess. So Joe Deshmukh, so he was the postdoctoral researcher, and he started thinking that he really wants to go into academia, and we obviously worked towards that. But then he switched from more theoretical end of formal methods to applications to cyber physical systems. And so when he finished the postdoc, he got a great opportunity at Toyota Research, where he could apply some of these ideas in verifying cyber physical systems to industrial problems. So he spent a couple of years at this Toyota Research, and then he applied for academic jobs. And now he is a professor at USC. So I think this spending a couple of years in industry research also can be a great stepping stone in conjunction with this postdoctoral research experience towards a really great academic positions. So I think one should keep all options open.
Okay, Dilma.
I will speak about a different aspect. That was when I hired someone. So mentors, what happens is, you know, you're in industry research, you see this great person that is with the university right now in this program. So I made an offer for, like, in the future, after finishing those 2 years. That was the job offer that I gave, but the person really wanted to join immediately. That was 9 months before it started. And I would like just to suggest that you think about this exploration and take the opportunity to think that there is also a cultural dimension. Depending on the culture that the person grew up in, it's really hard to be on this temporary job. So just, it was good that the faculty that I quote unquote stole it, the CI fellow person was understanding. And I thought that sharing right now would be a good thing, so that if that happens to you, that you think through what is the best for you, protect your time and your mentor. In that case, I'm sure NSF was happy that was 1.5 years of funding that they didn't have to do. So that was not an issue. But anyway, so that's a related topic I wanted to make sure I brought up.
Okay, Stefan?
I don't have that much to add. The only thing I would say is that a lot of postdocs arrive with a very singular, idealized view of what academic life is like, usually shaped by their experience as a grad student. And they think it's, of course, it's like that everywhere. And part of taking them through this is getting them to understand that, in fact, there's some significant differences between situations, both at different academic institutions and in industrial research, and just making sure, particularly because as it gets to the end, to the brass tacks, this is what Jeff Volker likes to call the dessert plate aspect of selection. Like in the beginning, everything is available to you, and then as time goes on, there's no more cheesecake and there's no more lemon tart, and there's some things left, and then you have to decide among them. And understanding that, in fact, that there are some substantive differences. It's not academia versus industry. It's this academic position versus this industrial position versus this startup position. And how should one think about those concretely as opposed to as an abstraction?
Okay, well, thank you, panelists, for answering the prepared questions. And now we're going to segue to the chat. There's a few things to just read, and we encourage everyone to add additional questions to the chat. So Andrew Chen asks, does CIFellows have a roll-up of the first people from the first program went on to do immediately after subsequently? Anne, can I ask you that question?
Of course. So we have that information. I've never put it in a format like this because of annual reports for NSF, and we recently went through and did a where is everyone now. So I actually think that's a really good idea, and we will put something together nicely formatted to share. We did give all of the fellows links to the past fellows just as people to reach out to as resources, but I really like that idea. So thank you for that one. We will do that.
And I will add, we contacted some of the past fellows in the course of putting this program together, and the gratitude was overwhelming. Let's see, Maddie tells you how you can join the Slack channel if you haven't. Selma Sabanovic has a question about teaching, but I see that there's some service here. I believe we've answered the teaching part, but I guess a question that we can ask the panel is, how do you balance, doing the research and service, right? If the postdoc is offered program committees and things like that. Any thoughts?
So I'll offer some thoughts. I think that to a limited extent, the program committee stuff is super valuable, not only because later on, later down the line, the same reason we recommend it for assistant professors, it helps them understand the process that they are submitting to. But to the extent that program committee experience is a social one, it's actually hugely beneficial for getting interviews, because at most institutions, it's somewhere on the order of 40 to 50% of the candidates who come through are already known to the people in the institution, and they say, hey, this person, we're interested in seeing this person. And there's no substitute for getting out there and meeting those people. And program committee is a great way to do that.
Yeah, and let me add to that. So yeah, I think program committees are great. And another new opportunity is these mentoring workshops. So I think postdocs can serve, give talks in these mentoring workshops. So I think every field these days at their major conference have a mentoring workshop for beginning students. And that also gives the postdoc an opportunity to get some exposure to the broader community and share their experiences with the students who are just starting in that field.
Okay, so Jeanette thanks us, but had to go to a meeting. Yuri Brun says basically that being an independent instructor was high pain, high gain. Let's see, Kim mentions the possibility of a 1-credit course that they're going to do. Let's see, Ron Catalini says that very much agrees with the importance of mentoring postdocs on the ins and outs of academic life. Did anybody want to elaborate more on that, or was it adequately covered before? I mean, how much are you advising them on like the topic and the depth of your sub area, and how much are you explaining to them how the process of being a successful academic works?
I can jump in there. I mean, certainly with more senior grad students and with postdocs, I'm more likely to tell them a little more about what I'm doing when I'm not doing my research work. Just to have them be a little bit more aware of the other things that you juggle as an academic, and to get them to start thinking about those issues, whether it's grant proposals or even, an interesting debate that came up in in faculty meeting discussions, or how we think about curriculum, just to bring up some of the meta topics we think about as faculty members that hopefully are interesting. I mean, there's a certain amount of whining we all do about the other stuff we do during the day, but I think there also are really interesting philosophical issues that come up, and it's useful for them to be thinking about them and to be thinking about themselves as peers in those kinds of conversations that they'll be having a lot more in the years ahead.
Okay, so Ron Cantanetti asks, how do people manage to keep your research group alive and interactive over Zoom? Guess we can let the panelists take a crack at that, since they had to do it, but they're not that far ahead of you. Any ideas?
So, in the years much before Zoom calls, that I had teams in Haifa and Ireland and China and things like that, what really made a difference was to make sure that no one would dominate the call and things like that. But I think with Zoom, the challenge is to actually get people engaged and their attention not to go to another place for all of us. So every now and then, I've been trying to do this Zoom poll, that what is your favorite ice cream, or what last movie you saw, or something like that, totally out. And it's just to help me and everyone to go back in, because it is really easy, I guess, that it's not only me, that I have no problem engaging in a 1 hour, let's say, faculty candidate talk. I am there every second, but if I miss that talk and I have to watch the video, it is painful, right? So I think that is trying to get more of that interaction and get them to speak and to speak more on their feet too. So that may work. But I don't think anyone really knows, in particular right now, where it feels so fragile and we don't know if we should invest too much on this or not.
I also saw a recent article that gave 5 pieces of advice. I don't want to look it up while moderating, but I'll make sure that it gets sent out afterward. I mean, a lot of it was sensible, but we need all the advice we can get.
So I'll offer one thing, which is it is pretty difficult. And any exercise that you can do that gets people to put in a lot of energy and focus, even if it has nothing to do with the research, I think is valuable. So like the kinds of things that we've done that I think have been successful tend to be physical things. So scavenger hunt, but where you pair people up and all right, now you have 60 seconds. Everyone needs to find, first group that finds a fire extinguisher and can bring it back to the Zoom channel is whatever. Or they have a puzzle they have to solve and they break off in groups of 2, but it's like short time frame. It's somewhat frenetic. They have to get out of their chair. And it gives them something to do and a partner to try to compete with. And it has nothing to do with research at all. but it makes that not just this terrible time looking at people's fake backgrounds.
I'll jump in related to my answer to the previous question. And what I've been trying in my group meetings the past few weeks is discussing kind of meta topics like how does a program committee work? And I've invited recent graduates from my group who are professors at other schools to join as well and contribute to that discussion. So I figured that way I'm trying to remind them how the community operates, or in some cases expose them to how the community operates. And those kind of conversations are also just a lot easier to have in a large group on Zoom than doing a practice talk for a conference or having a technical reading group. So it's a lighter topic, but hopefully it's lifting the veil a little bit for them as well. And inviting guests to come in to sort of break up the dynamic of me somehow doing a monologue with them.
Right. Or trip reports, things that are, where there's some interesting tidbit that's not, down in the weeds.
Exactly.
One thing related to that, to let you all know that we're going to do our next, we're doing a cohort building event for all of fellows next week on things I wish I'd known as I started my fellowship for them. But then we are also going to do in January, Margaret Martinosi is going to come and speak with the fellows. And we figured before that we would actually do an NSF 101. Kind of giving them the overview of why NSF is important and how it works. And then probably sometime in the spring, also do an overview of other funding agencies for computer science, because in talking with some people, we realize a lot of professors get out and then it's like, oh, wait, why? They don't need, what's the importance? Why do I need to do this? How do I do this? So we're going to try to do some of that for the fellows as a whole. So that's not something, because as I heard Jen talking, I think it's related, but it's not necessarily something graduate students need. So.
Okay, so David Coates observes that the CS candidates seem much less aware of how the game is played than people in the physical and biological sciences. I hope that's because our game is more cooperative than some places. Let's see. Having a weekly Zoom meeting. This is Yuri Bruin, game night. You guys can read yourself. Okay. Okay, so let's see, is there a question?
There's,
I'll just read Neil O'Rourke's thing because it ends with a question.
The question is basically how to write grants should they learn how to write grants as part of their postdoc? Is this worth spending time on, particularly compared to spending time on research and publications? Being exposed to grant writing seems valuable. Any advice?
what I do for people that I'm mentoring that they are in the market is that I show them some of my successful and unsuccessful full proposals. And I also, I've been showing something a little different, is that I got a lot of assistant professors who gave me the permission to use their research statement, the original research statement, teaching and service, and I show on the screen and I comment. So this kind of things that not I give them the proposals or any PDF, that's not about it. We're looking together, reading and doing this comment. I think this can be really, interesting and trying to do this meta-analysis. Why is this on the object description and why is this in this piece or not? So I enjoy doing it and it seems everyone who has done says that it's really good to demystify what are successful and unsuccessful, and many of us, at least me, I have plenty of examples of both.
Yeah, I did the same thing, and with permission, I've got proposals other people have written that I've shared, as well as application materials from academic jobs, including people that are now more senior in the field, what their applications look like when they were a fresh PhD or a fresh postdoc, so they can, look at someone they admire out in the community and see this is what they were, where they were when they were at the same stage as you, and how they presented themselves.
So my 2 cents here is that it depends a little bit. I think it's absolutely worthwhile for them to be exposed to some aspect of it, just because it is very different from paper writing. And again, like teaching, it's an unfortunate thing to go in cold and not understand that there are parts of it that are really arcane and have nothing to do with what we taught them to do in writing a paper. How much they should actually be involved, I think depends a little bit on where they are with writing. So if if they still like, if they need a bunch of work on making the papers work, then I would spend more time on that because that's a more important skill for them to develop. But if they're actually really good already at writing, then I think it's a good experience for them to get in, at least work on the technical component of the grant. And then they can watch as you talk about, here's what we're going to do with all of the other stuff. But it's absolutely worthwhile them understanding, for example, if it's a larger grant, how do you do team building? What's the difference between a grant that goes to DoD versus NSF? Why is there this strange thing where there are results in your grant proposal when it goes to NSF, but not when it goes to DoD? Like, what is that all about? That's worth them understanding so that they don't have to learn it from scratch. It's similarly worth them understanding, the value of $1 in different institutions and what overhead means and all of that, so that they have a mental model for what's going to happen when they go into this.
Okay, so the questions seem to be going down. I guess I'll ask the panelists. You have one last chance to ask questions, everybody. But for the panelists, is there any other piece of advice you want to give that you are burning to say? I've never met a quieter group of professors. This is ridiculous.
I don't think we are quiet. You were just trying to be aware of the time.
We also have gone over time, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll add one last thing for you, Mark, which is, and it's to reiterate kind of the thing I said in the beginning, that postdocs are other, but it's not just for them. Unlike your PhD students who kind of came up with you and everyone kind of thinks of almost as their children, postdocs are, someone else's child as it is who arrives. And so there's like an additional obligation, I think, that you have to take on to see this person through, that you are taking it on to help them get a job. And that it's not kind of a passive role where they're going to help you or your group, but that there's an extra mile that you need to go with a postdoc because they have not had the benefit of you training them for 6 years of their life. And so I think actually a postdoc there's in some way more responsibility than there is with a PhD student because you don't have as much time to make it up.
Okay. I guess I didn't know when our ending time was supposed to be. So I want to thank everybody and best luck giving forward and I think benefiting yourself and good luck in the pandemic.